Welcome back to another episode of On the Ball's Talking Points. My name is Gabriel and this is the show where we discuss noteworthy things that happen in English football, but we are primarily a Manchester United channel, and as such I'll be discussing Manchester United's game against Tottenham Hotspur on Friday on their first game back in Premier League restart, and I'll also be discussing why Manchester United absolutely need Paul Pogba, and I don't think that there's a question about it at all. We'll be doing a brief analysis of the game and how both teams set up in order to play against each other, starting off with Spurs. They started off with a 4-2-3-1 formation and switching to a 4-4-2 formation when it came to defending, having Eric Lamela push up next to Harry Kane in order for them to do their press. But their press was quite deep as they didn't press all the way up to our centre-backs, but they pressed instead to our midfield pivot of Fred and Scott McTominay. This was quite an intelligent tactic from Mourinho, and it was extremely beneficial for him to do it without the fans, because we know that Tottenham Hotspur would not allowed, or the fans of Tottenham Hotspur would not have allowed for the game to be played like that. There would have been some booing or there would have been some jeering from their side, but this was all perfect for Mourinho. Having no fans there, he could play however he wanted and he could try and get the result that he needed. Now here's why it was a problem for Manchester United. We similarly went with a 4-2-3-1 formation to start off with, having McTominay and Fred as our central midfield pivot. What happened was that Harry Kane and Eric Lamela, they would press into our midfield pivot, and so that would force our centre-backs who were starting off play. De Gea would opt for shorter passes either to our centre-backs or to our full-backs, have them carry the ball up, but these midfielders or these central backs could not pass the ball into the middle, and that was forced to pass us, or to have us pass the ball onto the wide side, whether it be to the wingers Daniel James or Rashford, or it be to our full-backs Shaw and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but we were just unable to pass the ball to the center so that these midfielders were able to carry the ball up forward and then really get going with our attack. This would either force our central defensive midfielders or our midfield pivot to drop deeper or move to the wide sides, leaving a gaping hole in the middle, making it extremely difficult for us to get our passes going, or the passes that we'd like going, so that we could move the ball forward. Another problem that we had was that Bruno Fernandes later on in the half was then forced to drop deep because he wasn't seeing any of the ball. But the problem lies again with our wingers. They were very static. They ran up and down only. They weren't making any diagonal runs, and that I'm going to chalk down to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tactical analysis, or tactical play rather. But that should be another video in itself where I break down why I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer isn't quite the manager for Manchester United, or isn't quite the manager to take Man United forward, or to at least match up with some of the greater managers in the Premier League, i.e. Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp, or even managers such as Carlo Ancelotti. Now, Bruno Fernandes got into a point in that first half where he tried to do everything, and it ended up messing up because he wasn't able to make the passes that he wanted, and the players weren't making any of the runs that they could make, or any of the runs that Bruno Fernandes could make. He would lose the ball, McTominay would lose the ball, Fred would lose the ball as well, and it was just an outright mess in that first half. Granted, it is their first game in a few months, but even so, the basics that they were doing was quite poor. For the first goal that Spurs scored, when Bergwijn made the run through from the halfway line basically to the goal that he scored, it was all individual Manchester United errors. Great run by Bergwijn, but something that could have been avoided. Luke Shaw, first of all, had a Sunday stroll all the way back to the goal while Bergwijn was sprinting up towards our goal line. Harry Maguire's starting position in order for him to get turned like that was absolutely atrocious, especially for somebody as experienced as he is, our captain. To be able to have a lapse of judgment or a lapse of error to that extent was quite poor. But the biggest thing for me was David De Gea. On any other day, he should have saved that. That was not, it was a hard shot, yes, but that was not something that's too difficult for a goalkeeper of his caliber, which begs the question, how much longer are we going to give him a free pass for the errors that he makes? Because errors like that, as we could see in the match, led to a goal. I still don't think that we should outright not make him our number one, bring back Dean Henderson from Sheffield United so he can start. I think that David De Gea should sit on the bench for a few games, as we do with players who are in bad form. He should sit on the bench for a few games, have Sergio Romero play, because Romero's not a bad goalkeeper. He's a fantastic goalkeeper, and he's shown time and time again that he can be relied on to make some great saves, for some good positioning, just to be an all-round very good goalkeeper. So I think David De Gea should sit on the bench. Whatever problems he's having or whatever he needs to reflect on, he needs to have that happen so that he can go back to that top goalkeeper that we know he can be. I don't think he's going into an early decline, much like Iker Casillas did back in the day. So I think that whatever problems he has, he needs to try and find a way to resolve it. Otherwise, Manchester United fans are going to start calling for his head. Not rightly so, but I do believe that he should sit on the bench for a few games and just try and figure out whatever's going on with him. Back to our midfielders and specifically the wingers. Daniel James needs some tactical help. I don't think it's his fault, but he's too static and he's too one-dimensional, and it becomes very easy to predict, and speed will only get you so far. He really needs to improve on his final third balls, his crossing, because he makes very often he makes the wrong decision. He doesn't do the right thing that he's supposed to do, or he overhits the cross, or he underhits the cross, or he makes the wrong ball. It's much like Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Our right side, attacking wise, is very, very weak, and that's why we need a player like Jadon Sancho. He'll really help out with that side. He'll help out with the crossing. He'll help out with the assist, because that is the side where we attack more often than not, and that's the side where the final third ball is just not happening for us. On the left side, we have players like Martial or Rashford who like to drift and rotate their positions, but they don't really do the crossing thing. They do the cutting in and they try and take a shot or try and get a ball inside. So on the right side is where our crosses are really going, and that's what these guys need to work on. Aaron Wan-Bissaka is quite solid defensively, but his final third play, or moving up with the ball even, really needs to get some, or he really needs to work on that. Marcus Rashford had the same problem as Daniel James on the left side. He was too static. He was running in a one-dimensional manner, oftentimes trying to cut in as well, but it just wasn't working for him. And like I said, that's all down to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. He doesn't really teach these guys when to make the correct runs, or how to make intelligent runs, or how to make diagonal runs. Whoever it is that's in charge of the attacking coaching, which I'm assuming is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, really need to work on that. As for Anthony Martial, absolutely anonymous. Not very much too much of a fault of his own, because the players who were around him weren't really supporting him the way that they should have. But I just think he's too inconsistent, and he's been very, very poor oftentimes, and he really needs to work on that. Also a player that needs to sit bench, perhaps have Ighalo there, because it seems like Ighalo does a little bit more to work harder, to be more integrated with the team and what the team wants to do. Now it comes to why we need Paul Pogba and the difference that he made when he came into midfield, as well as Nemanja Matic when he came into midfield. Spurs were pressing into the central midfield pivot as opposed to the defenders, and Fred and McTominay are not players who are capable of being quick enough or capable of being intelligent enough to use that space the same way that Paul Pogba would, and that's the difference that he made. He was able to receive the ball from midfield based on his intelligent movement and his intelligent spatial awareness, so that the defenders could get the ball to him, and he was able to move that ball forward, whether it be to the wingers or whether it be to Bruno Fernandes, so that they could actually get some attack going. And that's exactly what Pogba is there for. He's very strong, he's very powerful when he's driving up with the ball, and his passing range is incredible. He can make a pass from absolutely anywhere, as was the case when he made that wonderful pass to Marcus Rashford, much like the pass that he made in the first game of the season against Chelsea. Rashford perhaps was a little bit rusty, maybe it's injury rust, maybe it's not playing rust, but that is an example of what Paul Pogba is able to do. And he's able to do that alongside the likes of Bruno Fernandes. We saw how they linked up 2 or 3 times during the game. The most prominent time is when Pogba gave the ball to Bruno, who made a fantastic turn and pass to Anthony Martial, but some great defending by Eric Dyer stopped us from getting that goal that we know Martial was going to score in that position. So having Paul Pogba there, he is on his day, he's one of the best midfielders in world football, despite the criticism, despite how many times people say that he's not as good as people make him out to be, despite all the fans saying we don't need Paul Pogba. We absolutely need Paul Pogba if we want to be competing against the biggest clubs in the world, Manchester City, if we do make Champions League, against Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, Inter Milan. If we want to be competing at the highest level, we need the highest caliber of players, and that is Paul Pogba. He's already there. There's no need to look elsewhere. We just need to make sure that we do what he would like in order for us to keep him, not have him be above the club as some players do, but it doesn't seem like that's what he wants. He just wants to play football around players who can play to his capability, and I don't think that's too difficult to ask. He's been there a few years now. There's been many promises that's been made, and none of them have been fulfilled, but it seems like right now that can happen. Personally, I think the only thing that needs to be changed now is the manager, because we do have some very capable attacking players, but the manager just doesn't know how to manage them or how to use their strengths to bring out the best in our team. But it seems like there is something happening and there is something going. Nemanja Matic, when he came onto the field as well, I thought that was the perfect combination of what we needed, as well as when Mason Greenwood came on for Daniel James. I thought that this was the perfect balance of our players. We had Nemanja Matic, who knows how to move the ball forward, but he's playing more of a role of the destroyer. So he can feed the ball to Pogba. Pogba will play as a deep-lying midfielder who can feed the ball to Bruno, who will play as a higher attacking midfielder. And we've got our players like Rashford, like Greenwood, who are goal threats when they really cut inside and do whatever it is they need to do. The player who's up front, whether it be Martial or Igalo, then they'll be there to poach or whatever it is. But I think that's the perfect balance. Something else that I noticed is that Luke Shaw's defensive discipline needs work. He's very good up front, but at the back, his positioning is all wrong. His defensive abilities is all wrong as well. There's just something that needs to be done in order for him to get that, to not get that lapse in concentration that he does when it comes to defending. But at the end of the day, after a 3-month hiatus, it was very good to see them back in action. The last half hour is what we saw Manchester United can really do when they're playing with intent. And I really hope to see that when they're going up against Sheffield United, another very difficult team to break down. So I hope that the game against Tottenham really taught us a lesson, because that game is a very important game with regards to making it into Europe or making it into Champions League, depending on how Manchester City's court case go. But I think that pretty much wraps up the quick analysis or the brief analysis of Man United versus Tottenham Hotspur, and who I think should be starting, what some of the problems are, what I think we need. We definitely need a right winger, somebody like Jadon Sancho. I think is very important. Perhaps in order to replace Matic, who I think is our best option at the moment to play in that holding midfield position, but we probably would need a replacement there. Somebody like DD or Idrissa Gueye would be perfect, a perfect fit for that Manchester United squad. And we would need another left back, somebody who is just as capable defensively and positionally as they are attacking wise. Somebody like Ben Chilwell, although he is being linked to Chelsea, he would be a very good fit for Man United, and I really don't think that we'd need anything else in order to get us to the level that I believe that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is trying to get us to. Perhaps a new manager as well will get us to that level, but that remains to be seen. But anyway, that's it for this analysis of the Man United game and just Man United as a whole. We do need Paul Pogba. We need a new right back, we need a new left back, we need a new defensive midfielder, and we need our manager either to evolve or we need a new manager as a whole. That's it for me here on The Ball. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to like this video if you did, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and hit the bell notification icon so you know when the next video is released. I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.